Sorry, are you guys seeing the poster or not seeing the poster?
No, I see a black screen.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that. Okay, give me 1 second.
Yeah, and you're still in the practice session, so.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try this one more time. Okay, now are you seeing a poster? Still not, huh?
Still
Okay.
not.
We might just go live without it then. It'll just be you, Allison.
Can you make me co-host and I will?
Yeah, not from here. I think we'll just smile, Allison.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We'll just give the webinar a few minutes to get started. Grab a coffee and welcome to the monthly US-Canada Hands-Off Venezuela Picket Action. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Vancouver, Canada, and welcome to the US-Canada Hands-Off Venezuela consecutive monthly picket action, where we gather and unite our voices, demanding an end to the criminal US, Canada, and imperialist blockade, sanctions, and intervention in Venezuela. Today marks 3 years of consecutive monthly picket actions, as it is the 37th consecutive month we have united our voices. And it is my pleasure to welcome the speakers, activists, and organizers gathered here today. My name is Alison Bodine. I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. Today's action will be broadcast from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish Coast Salish nations. I encourage folks to type in the chat where they're joining us from, whether it be in a traditional Indigenous territories or anywhere around the globe. Today's action and all 36 previous actions have been organized by Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice and Just Peace advocates, with the support of Venezuela solidarity organizations and individuals across Canada and the United States. Today is an important moment for Venezuela. a moment when Venezuelans are preparing for the presidential elections to take place on July 28th, 2024, this summer. As activists and organizers across North America, it is critical that we arm ourselves in order to be able to talk about US and Canada meddling in Venezuela's internal affairs, and also in order to be able to combat the media lies that will be spread ferociously in the coming months and have already started. So today we've put together an excellent panel featuring Luis Delgado ARRIA, who is the Vice Rector of Research and Intellectual Creation at the International University of Communications, LAUICOM, in Caracas, Venezuela, and who I've had the pleasure to meet just last month in Havana, Cuba. ARNOLD AUGUST, author and journalist based in Montreal, Quebec, and SARA FLOUNDERS, a leading anti-war organizer within the United States. This is an excellent panel, and I'm really looking forward to having everyone here with us tonight. While the government of Canada and the United States, along with their imperialist allies, continue their campaigns of intervention, media lies, coup attempts, some just in the recent days and weeks preceding this meeting, blockades and sanctions against Venezuela, we each month stand with the heroic people of Venezuela and their right to self-determination. So we've come together at this month's Picket as we mark 3 years of monthly online events to condemn the US and Canada's sanctions on Venezuela, demanding US-Canada hands off Venezuela, no to US-led sanctions and blockade on Venezuela. The panel today will focus on ongoing US and Canada interference in Venezuela's internal affairs, and we'll also discuss how to build a stronger Venezuela solidarity movement in Canada, the US, and worldwide, as well as hear from the on-the-ground experiences of people and organizers like Luis Delgado ARRIA, who every day are fighting against this criminal blockade and organizing on the streets in Venezuela against imperialist intervention. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Luis Delgado ARRIA, who's Vice Rector of Research and Intellectual Creation at the International University of Communications, LAUICOM, based in Caracas in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Luis and I were able to meet last month in Havana, Cuba, at the second international meeting in Havana of theoretical left publications and parties. And I was also able to visit the International University of Communications in Venezuela when I was there in June to hear more about their on-the-ground work. And I'm really excited to welcome Luis. Before Luis begins, he will be speaking in Spanish today. So everyone listening to me now and wanting to continue listening in English needs to activate the interpretation system. The interpretation system is found at the bottom of your screen. It is located either with the 3 dots or the globe symbol, and you can choose to participate in English or Spanish at tonight's action. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. And again, welcome everyone. Luis Delgado ARRIA, the floor is yours. You may begin. Thank you.
Buenas noches o buenas tardes a
Good
todos
evening
ustedes.
or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the organizers for contributing to explaining the situation that the people of Venezuela have been going through, as just like many other peoples in the world, following a war technique that is not very known around the world, that is not very well understood, and it's essential to explain it, because the only way that we can manage to create new activism in favor of the rights of the peoples is to manage to understand the new domination logics, the political exploitation, the economic exploitation, and cultural attacks that are imposed by these sort of imperialistic policies. And when we see the peoples of the United States or Canada or European countries and in all other continents, we see that they are in solidarity with the causes of other people. So this is truly a logic that is under a capitalist system that ends up imposing this sort of practices that are not only illegal and criminal, but also genocide, and that contribute to having a worse world for all of us, not only for the countries that are affected directly. So thank you very much for the invitation. I am working at a new university in Venezuela, and we are seeking to reflect on communication, on political communication, geopolitical communication, and communication not as it has been traditionally understood as an instrumental technique, but actually a communication, a tool that can serve to understand the reality that we are embedded in, and then to explain that to the peoples and to all men and women in the world that want to come and see the conditions that we have been living under the last couple of years. So the topic here is the sanctions or unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. We don't like the word sanction because this comes from Latin, which means sanctified, and this so-called sanctions are not saint at all. So this is just a sin committed against the people. And then the name unilateral coercive measures is actually a classification that was created by the United Nations to impose upon countries that do not comply with human rights precepts, which is not the case of Cuba, Venezuela, and all other countries who are being the target of oppression measures and impoverishment techniques on the part of imperialistic powers and sectors, particularly the countries that are leading these efforts. So in order to explain some of this, I want to say that in the last couple of years, the Venezuelan government, when Chavez took office, well, we started seeing the first sanctions being applied to our country, first in relation to the purchase and the reparation of war instruments, such as ships and aircraft and military elements. These sanctions were, as I said, implemented first during the Obama administration, and since 2019, he sanctioned a decree against the government of Venezuela, which actually was against the people of Venezuela, a measure to exert pressure on the people. So this so-called sanctions have been revised by an observatory that we have here, and we have identified over 900 sanctions especially in the area of economics, against our economy, particularly against our PDVSA, the main state-owned company of oil production and distribution, and also against the legitimate right of our people. 40 of our aircraft have been prohibited from flying over United States and Canadian territory, and also European countries. The gold reserves have been blocked. Especially England has stolen 31 tons of international gold reserves, and also an American intellectual, Noam Chomsky, in January 2020 expressed the following, and I'm going to quote him. Chomsky said, "Sanctions imposed against Venezuela on the part of the United States blockade the means through which the government could have overcome the economic crisis, triggering a drastic fall of oil production and a serious economic crisis. This blockade caused the death of many people who were not able to access essential drugs and medicine to save their lives." That is Chomsky's declaration statement in January 2020. The current vice president of our republic, a year prior to that, in 2019, said as follows: "The financial economic blockade against Venezuela is a new form of terrorism." I think this is the most relevant or most accurate explanation or description of what is being done to our country. These measures have, there's a survey that was conducted in Venezuela called ENCOVI that explained how these measures had the potential of creating up to 20,000 deaths, causing 20,000 deaths a year. And this year marks the 10th year of these measures being in place. So these measures had the potential of causing over 200,000 people dead, fundamentally poor people or people who are suffering chronic diseases, people who needed HIV or AIDS medication or cancer treatment medication. We have had an important increase in cancer on women who were not able to have diagnosis or access to medication, or because we have not been able to update technology to carry out X-rays and MRIs to detect cancer. So this has led to a phenomenon that there's no concrete figures to show that we have reached the number of 200,000 deaths, because there is no specific numbers available, but we do know that these sort of operations, the blocking resources and the right to freedom of movement and trade could result into this. Just to give you an idea, the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima by the United States caused around 220,000 deaths at first, and the addition of those two nuclear bombs, according to some people, could be equalized to what these measures have cost in Venezuela, especially deaths of low-income people, people who do not have enough resources to pay for treatments or basic means for survival. And we also have to say that these measures led to our income, the wages, being between $10 and $20 a month. We know that international organizations say that critical poverty is earning $1 a day. So we can conclude that these measures could have led to a process of massive impoverishment of the Venezuelan people, up to taking a majority of the population to extreme poverty, that is earning less than $1 a day. We could say that between 2017 and 2022, Trump applied a policy that continues to be in place, because what they sought was to instigate civil war or create a social outburst or revolt. This situation can be seen in 2017, where there was a prohibition applied on the main oil production company in the United States. It's a Venezuelan-owned company that is based in the United States, Citgo. This company was prevented from sending revenue to Venezuela. In 2019, PDVSA was blocked from accessing all assets in the United States, including Citgo's assets. And in 2019, there was an operational blockade and a financial blockade of Monomere, a company based in Colombia, which was also seized by the Colombian government, which was led at the time by Iván Duque. So all this operation resulted in what the Human Rights Council of the United Nations called in March 23, 2001 as follows. This council expressed the following: the unilateral coercive measures in form of economic sanctions against Venezuela have long scope of far-reaching effect against the states and disproportionately affect the poor and the most vulnerable sector of the population. The United States has decreed 428 sanctions, 108 by Canada. Switzerland have dictated 58, the European Union 55, and the United Kingdom 36. The Special Rapporteur of the United Nations expressed the following, and also visited Venezuela and made an assessment of these sanctions against Venezuela and concluded the following. I'm quoting the rapporteur: unilateral sanctions against the mining, oil, and other sectors, such as the state-owned airline and other areas, constitute a violation of international law, and this policies also breach the principle of sovereign equality between states and is an intervention in internal affairs of Venezuela, which also affects the regional relationship, that is, Venezuela's relation to Latin America and the Caribbean. The Trump administration and then the Biden administration ratified another policy with the goal of imposing a sanction on Venezuela. What we know of this is that these sanctions had the purpose of fining Venezuela with up to $1 billion and $1 million solo and 20 years of imprisonment to all persons or companies who have a relationship with Venezuela. That caused the end of trade relations of many companies with Venezuela. Clorox, an American company which produced water-related products, left the country, and this caused great difficulty to make water drinkable in the country.
La red de control de crímenes financieros, llamado FinCEN, Estados Unidos emitió alertas en 2017.
So in 2017 and 2019, there were alerts that blocked the payments of food and medicine against Venezuela. And this translated into a financial blockade that created the exclusion of Venezuela from the system of the interbank system. 57 airplanes have been prevented from or prohibited to fly, and that has made us the second country with more sanctioned airplanes in the world. And we can say that 28% of the nations in the world currently are suffering from unilateral sanctions. And the main countries are Russia with 585, Syria with 480, Iran with 465, and Venezuela, according to this edition, 422, and Iraq with 150. Something that is very important to understand is that the politics that Western imperialism is following against Venezuela, it follows a policy against all countries that have oil potential. As you know, Venezuela has the biggest reserves in the world that have been certified, that reach up to 330 billion barrels of oil.
Luis, 1 second. Just to ask if you could please
Luis,
slow down a little bit for the interpretation.
Ok,
Sorry to
perfecto.
interrupt. Thank you.
Perfecto. Entonces, Venezuela posee las
so Venezuela has the world reserves certified that are the most important in the world. And what we can see is that the West is creating a policy of sanctions mainly against those countries that produce oil or who have the biggest potential to produce it. In the case of Venezuela, it's historically the main provider, trustable, of the United States and of the rest of the countries in Latin America, North America, including Mexico, of course, and destabilizing the oil market can create negative effects to the entire region, including the United States and Canada, because the break of this industry has effects against the oil companies that were working in Venezuela, that were either American or European, and have created a structural impact. of stopping the capacity of production and, of course, on the economic conditions of Venezuela. These measures against Venezuela created an effect that has no precedent in Latin America. To put it in other terms, the world has suffered 3 hyperinflation processes. The most serious one was suffered by Hungary after the Second World War, because of all the debts that Hungary had contracted and their impossibility to pay it, with an inflation of 42 billion% in 1945. The second hyperinflation, the highest one in the history, was produced artificially against Venezuela, starting in 2018 with an inflation of 1.5 million. And the third inflation was suffered by Germany during the First World War, when in 1923 it suffered a hyperinflation of 75,000%. This measure created the break of the Venezuelan economy, and therefore this created a campaign that was pushed by international medias, so that the young people of Venezuela would emigrate to other countries of Latin America and the rest of the world. So if we think about figures, let's think of 2013 in order to understand what was the depth of the sanctions. In 2013, Venezuela was producing around $56 billion, and the following year, where we had more sanctions against Venezuela, the country went from 56 to 39, around 39 million, and in 2015 to 13 million, and in 2016, and then in 2017 to 6 million, 2019, 2 million, and 2020, 745 million. And then in 2021, it was 778. If we add what Venezuela produced during these last 9 years of sanctions, we can see that during these years, Venezuela produced $75 billion. But if we multiply what we used to produce in 2013, those 56 billion, if we multiply it for 9 years, we have the figure of $509 billion. That is to say, these measures against Venezuela have stolen from us a fifth of our national budget. During these last 9 years, we've lost a fifth of our budget in losses. The budget for 2004 or the budget of this year for Ecuador, just to give you an idea of what it represents, it accounts for $35.5 billion. And what Venezuela lost, and budget of Argentina this year is of $75 billion. So what it was taken away from Venezuela during the last 9 years equals 12 times the entire budget of Ecuador for this year, and it equals 6.4 times the actual budget of Argentina of this year. So this is for you to understand the seriousness of this, of how we've lost our resources. And I'd like to finish my presentation with this quote from a former president from the United States who said, "I hate war, since only soldiers who have lived through the war can only understand and see their futility and their stupidity." And why did he say that? Why do I say that? It's because the people of Venezuela, it's one of the most generous peoples with less hatred and with more disposition, availability to get close to all the other peoples in the world. Before the sanctions, most of the people of Venezuela had a perception on the United States and on the Europe and Canada, a very positive perspective or vision. After these sanctions, the perception is that there are governments that with evil capacities that can place the population in subhuman conditions. And the radicalization of the process is produced mainly because with this capitalist logic, which is a logic of death and hunger, and a logic of ending human rights, and it's a logic in which we cannot live either in an international or national level. I have a quote of Kennedy who says, humanity has to put an end to the war before the war puts an end to humanity. That is a situation in which we are now. The problem in Venezuela is not only Venezuelan, or the problem in Nicaragua is not only the Nicaraguan problem. The problem is that the logic of the capital, it's creating a world that it cannot be lived, creating an economy that cannot continue like this, and this will result in a bigger problem for the entire world, with more poverty and more instability and more suffering for the entire humanity. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm here for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis Delgado ARRIA, for that comprehensive overview of the criminality and brutality of the sanctions on Venezuela. We say, Viva Venezuela, you are confronting the onslaught of what the US has as far as intervention and attacks with sanctions, blockades, and all forms of meddling in Venezuela's internal affairs. And I think probably after the panel we'll have time, I will ask you more about the International Communications University and how this is part of confronting US attacks. So I'll ask you later though. I wanted to also just say thank you for reminding us of the element of collective punishment of the sanctions and blockade, what their purpose is: to bring misery to the people of Venezuela and force the overthrow of the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro. And what in reality that translates to, as you've said, is possibly 20,000 deaths a year from these criminal US measures. So thank you for reminding us. Up next, I want to invite speakers speaking from the United States, the belly of the beast, Sarah Flounders. Sarah Flounders is a leading anti-war organizer with the United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC, the International Action Center, also known as the IAC, and the Sanctions Kill campaign. She's also contributing editor at Workers' World News. Welcome, Sarah. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And really, thank you to the organizers. Congratulations on the 3rd anniversary. It's a consistency that really is so important of continuing education and continuing resistance. Very impressive. And the speaker before me, I can't begin to match the wealth of information, of facts, of statistics, of figures. Our campaign is modest in comparison with this. It's so useful to have. But conditions may well become worse because the Venezuelan presidential elections are coming up July 28th. And that means increased US pressure of coup attempts, blockades, every form of economic strangulation. And yet the Venezuelan people continue with a heroic resistance, really a determination to survive and to continue to provide, even though it can't match what was being done for the whole population before the sanctions. It was stunning. It transformed for the working and poor of Venezuela what happened. And now there's an effort to yank it, rip it backward. Now, we very much focus in the Sanctions Kill campaign on this impact of sanctions. You can find our material at sanctionskill.org. But it is a campaign to understand, and it is a form of the most brutal warfare that does operate in the shadows. Unknown, unrecognized, quiet. Countries that are sanctioned are simply charged with being economically negligent of their population, and that's not what's happening at all. Now, we use the term actually unilateral economic coercive measures rather than unilateral coercive measures, because it isn't only the US. It is, so we say economic coercive measures. It is also Canada. It's the EU. It is that imperialist really band of countries that are determined to control the resources of the world, very much led by US imperialism, the center of this monster. A lot of our campaigns also are pointing out opposition to all sanctions, even those imposed by the United Nations under US pressure. They didn't just happen. It was that stranglehold on the countries of the world in an earlier time that imposed. You look today at the sanctions so harsh against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, of Iraq, Iran, Yemen. These are UN sanctions also. Libya, the Central Africa Republic, Mali, Sudan, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I could go on. So there are 15 countries under UN sanctions, but at US imposition and pressure. And it's the US that refuses to allow these sanctions to be lifted. So we do try to educate on both those sanctions, but particularly the sanctions on Venezuela, because this was a country so, as I say, rich in resources and in what it was attempting to do for the population as a whole in terms of nutritious food. I visited Venezuela. There was a time, it seemed, in the barrios, every block had a health clinic where blood pressure could be measured, immunization shots given, the most basic medical care that really changes life expectancy. And then with sanctions, it's hard for Venezuela to have gauze pads, aspirin, the most basic high blood pressure medications and so on. So people die from lack of medicine that medical science can offer, does offer around the world, offers right here. I think for many of us, we probably wouldn't be alive today if access to these medications, everything from heart meds and thyroid and all kinds of things, weren't available. And that's what happened in Venezuela. That total determined shutdown. It's a form of terrorism. There's no other way to look at it. To withhold both food and medicine. Now, in Sanctions Kill, that's part of really the most important part of the campaign, to say this is economic war, and it is a real form of terror. It impacts now a third of the world population is under one form or another of US collective punishment, a determination to force countries to comply with US domination. 40 countries now are under a form of US imposed sanctions, US direct sanctions, and the number of deaths is staggering. I will say that there is new things are breaking forward, and we should look at them in very positive ways, of a multipolar world that with time will allow countries to have new access to resources. We should look to that with a great deal of confidence. But for the right now, and coming up, let's say, on a presidential election, this is an effort by, there's no other way to look at depriving food to young growing children. It will lead to a generation where there's stunted growth, where there isn't proper organ development. It impacts even brain cells. We should look at what is being done in Gaza today to understand how far US and Israel are willing to take sanctions, to the level of complete mass famine, of absolute starvation. Now, the sanctions on Palestine are the most grievous in the world. What was so impressive with Venezuela was the determination to continue to provide even food packages. And you look at what happened to a diplomat, Alex Saab, literally kidnapped, tortured, held in solitary confinement. I traveled to Cabo Verde with a delegation to try to expose to the world the conditions under which Alex Saab was held when he was there. Then he was brought kidnapped again to the US. And it is a great victory of this period, one small victory, but we should always salute it, that now he is returned, Alex Saab, to his family and to Venezuela. But it shows how far they're willing to go in illegal actions, that there's no extent, there's nothing that they won't do. It is the expropriation of oil, of gold, of planes, of ships. It's the blocking of payments, as was defined so well in the actual numbers. And I won't give those numbers, but I will say that the whole accumulation of that, of stopping every SWIFT banking measure, that is a complete shutdown of trade. So countries are desperately finding ways around this. That is beginning, and we should in every way cheer it on. Now, 900 sanctions against Venezuela. As I say, it's the sheer number calculated to be a stab into every single area that is possible. I know you have other speakers, so I want to really sort of end on this note. A lot of this is in preparation, and I'll be seeing you in just days at the United National Anti-War Coalition's conference in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's April 5th to the 7th. And we have a whole conference program. You can look at it at UNAC, UNAC Conference 2024.org, which what it is an attempt to gather anti-imperialist forces from the US, from Canada, their voices internationally, to oppose every form of US, every form of imperialist war that is waged against the people of the world. and help people to see the links in both the assassination attempts, the invasions, the coups, and the economic sanctions that are imposed. So I see someone commenting there for BDS for Israel. Well, so are we. So are we. Because every measure against Israel, but who supplies all those weapons, all that money, billions and billions of dollars? That's the US. They would never really allow Israel to be sanctioned. There's a real difference between imperialist sanctions imposed, as I say, on a third of the world population, and people's sanctions, the effort to block the business dealings, the sports, the culture, and so on. That's a real difference. So let's never confuse people's sanctions, the effort to have some form of pressure against this criminal regime and against the US for the real wars it's carrying out, and imperialist sanctions, which, as I say, 40 countries, a third of the world population. That's a real crime. So thank you for everything you're doing and for always making that connection that Canada operates absolutely in league, in step with the US imperialism. And that means every measure against Venezuela, here they are, hand in glove, and by raising this month after month in your actions, I think it builds solidarity to a whole new level. So thank you so much. And as I say, congratulations on your 3rd anniversary. And let's end this form of absolute terror against the population of the world. Viva Venezuela.
Viva. Thank you very much to Sarah Flounders from the United National Anti-War Coalition and many other leading anti-war organizations in the United States. There are links in the chat. Tamara from Vancouver and Fire This Time has been helping with the tech today, and so has put some links in the chat. But I encourage people, if you can, come to Minneapolis, Minnesota, April 5th through 7th for the United National Anti-War Coalition's conference, where we'll be talking about Palestine, but also important anti-imperialist organizing, such as building a more united and stronger movement against blockades and sanctions by the United States, including Venezuela. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us here today and for all the work as well with Sanctions Kill and everything that you do. Our final speaker is going to bring us back to Canada. That is Arnold August. Arnold has been one of those joining together at many of these monthly picket actions. As Sarah said, yes, 3 years of consistent work of uniting our voices across the US, Canada, and internationally is definitely part of building a more united, a stronger movement in solidarity with Venezuela, which is more needed today than ever before as Venezuela comes into the targets of the US government once again go into their presidential elections. So Arnold August is going to be speaking with us here today as an author and journalist based in Montreal, Quebec. Arnold is a member of the editorial board for the International Manifesto Group and contributing editor for the Canada Files. Arnold's books have been translated from English into Spanish and Farsi, and Arnold writes regularly about Canada-Venezuela affairs, among other topics. Arnold August, welcome to the monthly picket action for US-Canada Hands Off Venezuela.
Thank you very much for inviting me. First, I have to congratulate all of the people in Vancouver as well as in Winnipeg for carrying on these actions all this time, and specifically for your contribution to the freeing of Alex Saab. That was a great victory, and all of you had a role in this. I would like to just, Louis mentioned the impunity of the powers, the Western powers in carrying out their sanctions. I would just like to give one example to expand on that. Like the Canadian government, they have 50, 60 pages in their global affairs, that is Minister of Foreign Affairs, they have about 50, 60 pages dedicated to Venezuela, that is sanctions against Venezuela. And of course, they maintain all their documents. And even if you look at their website now, just to show how arrogant they are and not afraid of any, actions taken against them, their impunity, they still have on their website, 2019, Canada recognizes the interim president of Venezuela. They have no shame. They're so arrogant, not the Guaido's followers, even they do not recognize it, but that's okay. They're arrogant. I'm getting to my main point. Like what has been developed by SARA and UNAC are really a solid foundation on the issue of sanctions, and I encourage everyone to participate in this event that's taking place in April. I would like to concentrate on an aspect that goes hand in hand with the economic sanctions. As far as Venezuela is concerned, I would say they are sanctions without bombs, but it's pretty close to bombs as well, because there was an assassination attempt against President Maduro. And all those Western powers who are in favor of democracy and all that didn't have a word to say about it, but indirectly also put that blame on the Venezuelan people. Now, the economic war is very important, and side by side with that, you also have an important war on the question of ideas, a cultural war. For example, Canada is not just like a country up in the air. Canada is based on a white colonial settler state that evolved on the basis of genocide against the indigenous people. And later on, side by side with that, it became, a power with its own imperialist ambitions. For example, in Latin America, with regards to minerals, with regards to gold, for example, Venezuela. So side by side with that, you have imperialism of Canada interfering in Latin America. So what you have, Canada, is really colonialism at home, still going on against the indigenous people, and imperialism abroad. That's what Canada is all about. And the basis of that is what? It is the, arrogant US-centric notion that the governments of the North, that is United States, Canada, and Europe, that whole alliance, they are superior to the peoples in the South, and only they know what is best for Venezuela. That is why in the very first sentence of their 50, 60-page website, it says that Canada is very concerned about the situation in Venezuela. So I'm asking, why the hell is Canada concerned about Venezuela? It's none of your business. Venezuela is an independent country. They're sovereign. You should not be concerned about Venezuela. You should be concerned about Canada and the genocide that's been carrying on up to today against the indigenous people, and your open alliance as well with the United States and the fascist government in Israel, and committing a genocide right now in the other side of the world. And you're concerned about Venezuela. Why? Because Venezuela defends its sovereignty, unlike the Trudeau government, which is the little sovereignty that Canada has. The Trudeau government is completely selling it out more than any other prime minister since World War II. So that, I think, the issue of simultaneous struggle against the economic sanctions, as well on the question of ideas, that the Western powers such as Canada, their superior notion, racist superior notion, that they have a right to make decisions and to try to influence the affairs in the global South, for example, Venezuela, because supposedly they are not able to carry out their own form of government and their own social political orientation. Now, Canadian government, yes, it carries out sanctions. It's quite different. They have a very impressive list of about, I don't know, over 100 individuals from Venezuela. If you read that list, go to Global Affairs, Canada, Venezuela, you'll find that page. From Nicolas Maduro and down, everyone is there. All of our friends are on that list, okay? Now, so this is the basis of any of these people can be are sanctioned, are pressured Canada should not have relations, economic and trade relations with these people who are involved in all aspects of Venezuela. So you cannot escape that aspect of what Canada is doing. Now, Canada, I mean, SARA mentioned that. Canada actually is involved, not many people know, there's actually an association of Canada and United States against Venezuela to impose sanctions against Venezuela. And if, for example, the results of elections take place when Maduro was elected and the Trudeau government doesn't like it, they say, well, based on the association of Canada and United States and Venezuela, we are imposing more sanctions. You know, how more of a sellout can that be, as the Trudeau government is doing right now? And the Trudeau government, in addition to the economic sanctions, also carries out very important diplomatic support, the support of ideas, in support of the United States. In that website that Canada had, they say proudly, we have carried our views, which is really the views of the United States and Canada, to the G7, the G20, and they list all of the international forums in which Canada has intervened to pressure other countries, and it's easily done with Europe, to also carry out very strict measures against Venezuela. So this is the role that Canada plays. It's basically using, Trudeau, I said this before, I have to repeat it, when that whole struggle took place with the Lima Group, after Trump was elected and Trudeau was elected, he actually acted as the nice face, the acceptable face of the Trump government. You can't get any lower than that. He actually volunteered to do that through this association, which of course later fell apart. So I think that it's important for people in the West, in Canada and elsewhere, that we actually also, while opposing the economic sanctions, also raise the question or oppose this notion, this US-centric notion that also applies to Canada and the United and Europe, that the North has a right to decide and to have an opinion and to do on what should happen in the South, for example, in a country in Venezuela. Once we, try to undo this notion that is still accepted by some people, it goes almost unnoticed when someone like Trudeau says, well, we're concerned about what's happening in Venezuela. People should say, who the hell are you to be concerned about Venezuela? You're not Venezuelan. You're not even a Canadian. You're a sellout. So, mind your own business. I think if people stand up against that notion, that struggle against the ideas of the superiority of the white settler colonial state, such as Canada, then we're making very important headway. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much to Arnold August for giving the important perspective from Canada and helping us frame our ongoing struggle in solidarity with the people of Venezuela, which involves convincing poor, working, marginalized people in Canada and the United States that standing with Venezuela against sanctions is in our interest. Our interests are ending these brutal policies of the government of the US and Canada, both in solidarity with the people in Venezuela, but also because their struggle for justice is our struggle for justice. So thank you, Arnold, for that. And to all of the speakers, again, Luis Delgado ARRIA, Sarah Flounders, and Arnold August. We do have a few minutes of time. I had one question I'd like to address, and Luis expressed that he'd be happy to address the question. So that is coming from Roger Harris, who writes, Maria Corina Machado, barred from running for president, identified Corina Yaris as a substitute. Has Yaris successfully registered to run? There were issues about her nationality, which is dual citizenship, and timing. Press reports yesterday said she missed the deadline to register, but today some of the press such as Reuters, say she is registered. How have these issues played out? Also, please comment why this unknown professor was selected. Was Yaris selected as a Vente Venezuela candidate, or does she represent a larger opposition group, such as the Unitary Platform or the PUD? So just 1 second, Luis, you also, any context you can bring is important, but I will say the question is very much about the run up to the presidential election in Venezuela, which, like many of us are familiar with, begins with the political parties in Venezuela choosing their presidential candidates. The United Socialist Party of Venezuela and others that are part of a coalition with the United Socialist Party of Venezuela will be supporting the candidacy of President Nicolas Maduro. And what Roger is talking about is the right-wing opposition in Venezuela and how they are choosing their presidential candidates. So there's kind of a lot of context involved with this, but just to understand and to know what is important, I think, to this picket action is especially the way the US and Canada are intervening, which is they are reporting on, who the opposition is choosing. They're reporting on what the Supreme Court of Venezuela is deciding, the government is deciding. They're very much intervening in the sovereign affairs of Venezuela to try and convince people in the US and Canada that President Maduro is not a legitimate, candidate for president, and that their candidates, such as Maria Corina Machado, should be elected president. So that's a little bit of a taste, but Luis, I leave it up to you to address the question. Thank you.
Okay. La pregunta, por supuesto, requiere una
The question, of course, requires a context of the whole history of Venezuela, especially the history of the last 22 years. But just to put it graphically, the government of the Chavez was characterized for having a relation with two parts of the opposition. One opposition that was related to the democratic logic, and another opposition that maybe we cannot call opposition because it was movements. We could say movements that started working with mercenaries around the world in order to destabilize the government of Chavez. Although during Chavez's mandate, there was some sort of order or negotiation with the opposition at that time, during the government, starting with Maduro, when Maduro took office after the assassination of Chavez. That's still in discussion. There are no proofs so far about this. Maduro was not recognized by the opposition. He has never been recognized, not even from the very first moment, not even now. Only 4 years ago, when we had a national assembly, some parties of the opposition that were exhausted, let's say, since the population was desperate because of the policy of the mercenaries that put the people in this terrible situation, economic situation, due to all the mercenary movements, etc. I think that at some point in Venezuela, there were up to 30,000 mercenaries to destabilize the government. But well, these are just random figures. What I mean is that there's been one sector of the opposition that has tried not only to create these coup attempts, but and especially Maria Correa Machado has been traveling to the United States persistently and talking to the United States presidents and creating statements, saying statements that our government is illegitimate, that is criminal, that it's a government we have to not recognize. So we have two different axes here. On one hand, this opposition says they are democratic, but on the other hand, they are subversive all the time. So the fact that this woman has been chosen, this so-called academic or intellectual, this is something that really confused many people, because the logic has always been of participating when there's one possibility for them to win. If there's no any chance for them to win, they withdraw from the elections. Therefore, for me, it was a surprise that she, or that they were trying to register a candidate that was not known at all, a woman that is 80 years old and had no opportunities, but also it seems that she had a dual citizenship, and the constitution of Venezuela prohibits a person that has a dual citizenship to be a president. So she wasn't able to register because of this, but I'm not sure whether yesterday there was any solution for this, but it's a little bit irrelevant anyway, because the opposition of Venezuela, if they don't win the elections, they say there was fraud, right? So that's my answer.
Thank you, Luis. There's another question in the chat about the presidential election, and I just wanted to say that I think next month, some of these decisions and kind of who's running is really coming as news today, and I think next month will be really well suited to talk more specifically about the presidential election, and we'll get some speakers to talk more about US intervention in the presidential election process. So let's hold the rest of our questions about the presidential election until next month's consecutive monthly picket. But thank you very much, Luis, for that context and explanation, and kind of giving us ideas of what to watch out for when reading, especially, imperialist news about what's happening in Venezuela today. I think that also it would be great, Luis, if you wouldn't mind, to just share a few words about what the International Communications University is in Venezuela, the institution that you really helped found and bring together.
Bueno, muchas gracias, ¿no?, por la oportunidad.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. The university was thought and created and dreamt by President Hugo Chavez, but it was created finally by President Nicolás Maduro. The idea of this university was to rethink the communications, to rethink politics, and rethink it in terms of not only instrumental terms, but also to be able to respond to the cognitive war that we are leading with imperialism. And it's a war that is directed or is thought to poison the peoples against their own governments, to create social hatred, and of course, to rethink communication, not only a communication that is placing at the center the humanity and the community, but also something that thinks of about the problems, but also helps to cure the traumas, because this situation has created what we could call traumas, psychopathic traumas in the population, because on one hand, the population understands there's been a difficult situation, but on the other hand, for anybody, it's very difficult to understand and to explain that that their kids haven't been able to eat the minimal for 5 or 10 years. It's very difficult to understand that, that the health conditions, including during COVID, there was a systematic denial of the need of vaccines and masks and everything that the patients required. That amount and that rate of hatred and revenge against Venezuela, it's something that has been very difficult for the population to understand. And of course, the opposition, or the so-called opposition, has used this and has said repeatedly that the problems are not the sanctions, not the unilateral coercive measures, not imperialism, but that the problems have been corruption, inefficiency, and inexperience from the part of the government. And of course, there are people that still, due to these traumas, don't really know what to think. They don't know how to explain their kids and their grandchildren about what they've been through. Many families are divided. They have kids or grandchildren that have left to another countries. Therefore, the university wants to be a space that helps communicate the situation that the world is living from the perspective of Venezuela, but also with the help of academics, poets, and the world communicators, in order to think of a new world.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Part of building our stronger and more united Venezuela solidarity movement often involves encouraging folks to go on delegations to see Venezuela for themselves. And I would encourage anyone that is going on a visit to Venezuela as part of a delegation, first of all, to, yes, go on that delegation, but secondly, to say as well, if you are in Caracas, to please visit the International University of Communications. There is a, multimedia displays about important events in the history of the Bolivarian Revolution, and then also just to be able to interact with students and teachers and the programming happening. So definitely an important project to support. And thank you again to Luis for joining here tonight. There is now the next part of our program is the time of greetings from Venezuela Solidarity organizers coming together from across Canada and the United States. And then I wanted to remind people we close each action with a group photo where I'll invite everyone to join us here and to turn on your cameras if you can. We'll raise our fists, we'll chant together as if we were in a united action in one place, such as in front of the White House in the United States or Parliament Hill here in Canada, the time to unite our voices. Our first person I wanted to invite up to give greetings is Mary Carmen Guevara. I'm just checking to see if she's been able to rejoin us. Yes, Mary Carmen is here. Mary Carmen is an organizer in solidarity with Venezuela and many important causes in Ottawa, Canada, with ALBA Movimientos and other organizations. It's always great to have you here with us, Mary Carmen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Alison. I wasn't thinking to give my greeting speaking. I just sent you a greeting message, but anyway, greeting from Ottawa, Canada, and we're still here. We are still working, supporting Venezuela, Cuba, Palestine, and we will continue. And I want to congratulate Alison for the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Carmen. I will also say others I was unable to convince to join to speak, unlike Mary Carmen. So thank you to all that have posted in the chat. It is great to see folks here all the way from, Europe and beyond. Yuri, hello, it's good to have you here with us. Thank you to everyone that posted in the chat as well. Dee Niebert joining from the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War. We also have a greeting here from Janine Solanki from Mobilization Against War and Occupation, MAWO, in Vancouver, Canada. Janine is the chair of Mobilization Against War and Occupation. Folks joining us from Arizona and other parts across the United States. It's really been a pleasure to be with you here today. I'll also say hello to Liz Lee, who's joining us all the way from Newfoundland, Canada. Liz, hello. Welcome to the monthly Picket Action, and thank you for all of your work and support. There's a number of important actions and events to continue supporting. We heard from SARA today about the conference of the United National Anti-War Coalition taking place April 5th through 7th. And I also wanted to let people know about the next monthly Venezuela picket action, which will be continuing. And as we mentioned, will continue on, especially focusing next month on US intervention in Venezuela's electoral process. So that will take place on the last Tuesday of every month. So Tuesday, April 30th at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Encourage you to put that into your calendars. Babette has just posted here in the chat from the Latin America Solidarity Committee in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Coalition to Normalize Relations with Cuba. Thank you again for all of your solidarity. We are going to start upgrading folks in the meeting today, which involves receiving a message on your phone that will ask if you want to rejoin the picket action as a panelist. You should say yes if you want to be able to turn on your camera and join us in chanting. I will give a big thank you to our interpreters for today. Julieta and Salome have been working very hard to make this a fully bilingual event. And I will also just ask if any of the speakers would like to make any closing comments before we join together for our group photo. Arnold, is there anything you'd like to add to today's program? All right, I think that's we're good. And then we had Sarah, I believe, had to run to another meeting. So she had to jump off just now. But again, a big thank you to everyone for joining us to mark 3 years of monthly consecutive picket actions demanding US, Canada hands off Venezuela, no to sanctions on Venezuela. It is really, we would rather not be here another month fighting against this criminal US-led policy, but we will continue these monthly picket actions from Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, the Venezuela Peace Committee in Winnipeg, and Just Peace Advocates. We will continue inviting folks to join us in this space online, but also encourage people on the streets at every opportunity to continue the victory we had with the release of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab in December, a victory won by people mobilizing in Venezuela and around the world for his freedom, to continue that to bring about an end to criminal US sanctions and blockade on Venezuela, an end to the economic coercive measures that every day deny the people of Venezuela access to food, medicines, basic goods, in an attempt to convince them to overthrow the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro and the Venezuelan revolutionary process. There's still a few more folks I know collecting their cameras and joining on. But Tamra, if you want to turn off the interpretation system, actually, then we can do some chanting together. Folks should be able to unmute themselves, I will say, and we can chant all together. Once again, thank you very much to Salome and Julieta for your work.
Salome y Julieta por su trabajo.
And translation is off. No hay más interpretación. Gracias. Vamos a gritar juntos. Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
No blockade on Venezuela.
It's great to see you all and to unite our voices. We'll see you again next month.
Alison, can we say in Spanish?
Sí, claro.
Okay. Abajo el bloqueo para Venezuela.
Abajo el
bloqueo para Venezuela.
Unidos saca las manos de Venezuela.
Saquen las manos de Venezuela.
Saquen las manos de Venezuela.
Saquen las manos de Venezuela.
Thank you, Mary Carmen. Que viva Venezuela. Long live Venezuela.
Que viva Venezuela.
National solidarity.
Que viva Venezuela.
Franco Machado.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, night.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.
Gracias, Alison.
Abrazo fuerte. Thank you,
Muchas
everyone.
gracias.
See you in Minneapolis, Allison.
See you in Minneapolis.
I just